sleep doesn't have to be, and maybe like 50 years from now, this will just be normal. Sleep doesn't have to be this thing that like you repair and get better and function well. It actually can give you something of a competitive advantage,
Yeah.
which might be necessary in today's world. And I basically realized, you know what this does? It makes you burnout proof.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to Something for Everybody. My name is Aaron Machbitz. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, my man. Thank you. Been looking forward to this for a while, for quite some
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah, man, me too. First and most important question, Nick, is how are you doing? Like, actually, for real, how are you doing?
It's a weird time. I think I don't think I've ever had a time where like things seem to fall apart at the same time new things are springing and coming forth, so there's like new things that I'm like, I've been working for that for years. So tell you, like, one of the reasons I'm hitting the podcast circuit is I just published this book, and there's aspects about the book that I think have to do more with your sort of intrinsic focus on people's lives. And so I've spent a lot of the past year in meetings with marketing and salespeople who are like, look, if you come at it from this way, you will fail. You will not have a sustainable business.
Hmm.
And coming to grips with the fact that for me, this experience was a life or death experience. And the impacts that I found out about what's impacting the amount of people in the United States blew my mind to the point where my goals eventually became like, okay, if I have to fail to win, then that's what it will be. So it's a weird time because some of the things that I've been like, yeah, no, I really want to be able to help people who maybe not otherwise would think that this is a way to get there and reach those people are starting to happen. So I'm thrilled. I'm like, and we'll talk about some of the recent success where I'm like, wow, this group of people who really, in my opinion, when it comes to the issues that are as important as suicide and what and how sleep factors into that and the things that support sleep, they're in a wonderful position beyond me yet to make a difference in this area and really help people. Except for they've figured out a couple things about parts of our population and they're like, wow, that's a really easy way to make money.
Mm.
And so for me, I'm like, you're in my way. You're in my way. And so I've had recent success where I'm like, ooh, I just knocked those people without having to be too rude and create enemies, which is cool. Same kind of thing. I think the idea of publishing a book, this mini story is this guy who was going to do the press release was like, well, what's the goal? And like their focus was on building a consulting business. So I should say up front on a formal side, hi, I'm Nick Stewart. Despite a weird topic, I'm a pretty enthusiastic, upbeat, funny person. And my full-time work now is devoted to sort of a split thing, as I do what we call sleep consulting, which is I'll train people individually, at the group level, at the organization level, around sleep. And we can talk about sort of like what's been broken in that way and why people will be like, what? Why would I ever hire someone for that? That makes no sense. And I'll just say that for what I thought, and something I hope we get to, is that new stuff, some of the recent stuff where I'm like, wow, that's the impact? Cool, this is great. Is that, first of all, people should just know right off the bat, and I think this is the place to say it. Guys, like, if you live in the United States, we're really looking at about 1.5 to 2 out of 3 people are having a sleep problem. You're surrounded by people with sleep issues. And we'll talk about what that means, but if you're having a sleep problem, especially if you're a guy, the only stats that we have currently are that women are 40% more likely to see their doctor about it but they're also about, it's like 42, 43% more likely to seek an alternative path to getting it fixed. Because for those of you that don't know much about this, what I found out later after I share with you my personal experience, every single year, the number of people who go to their primary care physician for help for this is going up. The speed at which we reach that level every year is faster, which is wild. So I just want to say right out of the bat, especially if you're a guy, and you're like, I've been struggling with sleep since college or the last 5 years or whatever, you're so not alone. And it's totally not your fault. There's some major problems that explain why you would be in this position. I think a lot of men especially are like, and I've seen this in my like first year of the data analytics that LinkedIn and other platforms will grab for you. I can tell who's consuming the content. So like, for example, I had this great interview between myself and a neurotechnologist entrepreneur from Canada who's bringing a sleep product to the market. And so I would drip interview clips over the year. And so I could see like, oh, it's owners, CEOs, and founders, and then someone else. They're watching these things. Aaron, in like the 9 to 12 months those have been there, ask me how many times someone sent me a comment, hit the like button, or asked a question.
I want to say less than 3.
Never.
Okay. I was right.
It finally happened like a month and a half ago or something. And I was like, what's going on? But basically never. So like after a while, I was like, I know you're watching. Like, are you at work? And you're like, no, Samantha, I'll be out for the Caesar salad for the group lunch in just a minute. I'm just finishing up on something. And it's like, secretly they're watching me and some other guy talk about sleep, and they're like desperately trying to put this together. And it's like, guys, I know what's going on. So I just want to say, like, if you're a guy and you happen to be on Aaron's show and you've been like, yeah, in college I had issues, and then like I did this and I did that, and my sleep's not been great for the last 20 years and stuff. It's like, A, it's not your fault. It really isn't. You're totally not alone. And B, like, good news. Like it doesn't have to be that way. I know you thought it did, but there's things about how we can approach this, and I think that's the reason why I wrote the book. I lost someone, and we can talk about that too, and that's how the book came about. But what I'm finding early on is that it's giving people something that wasn't there before. Which, you look like a very fit guy, for example. You into physical fitness?
Yep, since I was 13.
So like, one of the broken links in this whole thing that's going on is that when you think about physical fitness, really it kind of came from doctors being like, we got major health problems and we can't handle the load. We need more. And then over time, physical fitness became this huge industry where Aaron can go to like multiple different gyms, train with different trainers, see certain nutritionalists, choose certain products to wear, certain trackers to follow. He already in his mind is like, I might educate myself every couple of years in an area where there's a book or new research or whatever. And the big thing is that behind all that, there's these relationships where like people in academic research areas focus on that kind of stuff, right? And so like people on the ground who do work with like you, Aaron, they might have a connection with those people and be like, hey, we kind of want to know if someone with Aaron's prototype does this, this, and this each week, which we've been working with him on. Let us know what the results in this area, and this area for him. But also when you're done, do a version that's like half the time and let us know what the results are. That doesn't exist for sleep. Those connections don't exist. So for people like me and people who I've met and networked with who either are making products or are on the ground trying to help people, they can't turn and go like, hey, I'm interested in this because Aaron showed me this, and this, and I wonder if more people would benefit from that. It's not there yet. So that's one of the reasons why I got involved on a bigger level. And some of the things I'm really glad to see that the book is starting to do for people, where they're going like, oh, cool. You just gave me an idea where I can put what I knew about it into sort of a framework that makes sense and that I relate to. And it also kind of creates okay, and I'll collect future information and improve, which adds to my idea. And cool, I'm good to go. It just wasn't there before. It was just like, if you had said to me like, hey Nick, what's up, man? Yeah, what's new? Oh, I just recently started with a trainer. I immediately know what kind.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you had said coach, I probably would have known what kind. And then I probably would have followed up with like, cool, you looking to lose some weight? I live in Boston, folks, but like I work with people literally internationally. And I'm like, oh, you looking to do the marathon? It's awesome. But if I had said, what's up and what's new? And you said, oh, I'm working with a sleep consultant. You'd be like, on what? What the hell is that? That makes no sense. And so for me, I'm like, we're not going to be able to get that 2/3 of the Americans to slow down and that problem to see itself start to go down if we don't change the ideas around this. Because this is another thing that will shock people. You can go crazy with AI. I love this. People are like, oh my God, AI could help me. Well, I'll just tell you straight up what AI will do. AI is like Google search on steroids. So what's it going to do when you ask for help with sleep? It's going to go track down everything that it can find that's ever been out there, suck it all together, get rid of stuff that like didn't really seem like the rest of it, and then go here. Well, guys, like I had this, and this is something I like really recently put together, and this is different than physical fitness. The basics, the science, A, it's there. B, it's been pretty much the same for the last like 4 or 5 decades.
Mm-hmm.
Like next month, there's not going to be a new uncovering. It's going to greatly change things. So people will come to me and they're like, yeah, Nick's like a living, breathing book of 50 hacks on sleep. And I'm like, oh boy, here comes the disappointment. The disappointment's coming. Sorry to disappoint you folks out there who thought like if you learned 3 hacks on today's session, this was going to do it. Guys, there's like less than 5 hacks in sleep. It's really those basic science parts, we have to figure out a way to introduce them into your lives, just like you would a fitness program, in a way that makes sense for you, and then track those results over time, just like you would with fitness, right? It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I give that as an introduction. I'll shut up for now and let you sort of guide the next binary pathway that we go down.
Yeah, I just want to sort of piggyback on some of the points you made and relate it to me in a way that I think will make sense. So like I come from a sports background. That's what I've done my whole life. And so the theme in sports, as you know, is hard work, grind, hard work, grind. And until up about maybe 3 years ago, the conversation was there was never about sleep. It was always like, hey, you should probably get some recovery in. Hey, you should probably do a little bit of this. But there was never a true emphasis on sleep, because in a lot of people's minds, that was you wasting time sleeping when you could be getting up earlier to work harder. And only in the last 3 years has there been a super strong emphasis on sleep is now as crucial as anything else, because sleep is the only way that your body is going to get fully recovered. It's the only way that you can actually be at your best on a consistent basis if you are sleeping the appropriate number of hours. There's like 1% of the population who can be at their best with like 4 hours of sleep. You are not one of them. Like 1%, less than 1%. Most of the time. So like, and then when it comes to men in regards to that, I feel like me specifically, like there's shame that's involved with that, because if I have someone who can't sleep, that probably means I'm not working hard enough, and then I'm not doing this enough, I'm not providing for this person or this thing, and then I can't speak about it because that makes everything much worse than it already is, as I'm sort of going through these loops in my brain. And so I think a lot of culture is moved through sports. I think sports have a deal to do with how we move in culture, and a lot has to do with mental fitness. That's a big push now. It started in sport, now it's in businesses, and I think sleep can be the exact same way when you have people like LeBron James who are spending millions of dollars a year on how can I sleep the best every single night so I can be at my best every single day. And so I think that's really cool, and I think you're coming in now at a really crucial time, because now people every day can be at their best by sort of moving in this direction to think about their sleep in a different way, not as something that's going to hinder their life or take away from their goals, but something that's going to be additive, that like, if I do this, man, I can be at my best a little bit more often because I'm getting full recovery. So those thoughts just kind of popped into my brain as you were talking about,
Let's touch on
men.
two things right away for folks. There's like two things. One thing that's in my book that speaks to that, and then another that is something that I'm starting to develop that you totally expose. So the first thing that's a little easier to see is, what is this book? And again, this kind of goes back to kind of like an American cultural thing, and then a men thing. So just so people know, like, most sleep books are like terribly boring. Like, why would you read a sleep book? It makes no sense. Secondly, they tend to be like, step 1, Aaron, do this, and you fit in such and such box.
Close your eyes
And
gently.
yeah. Or a third of them are about dreams, and I'll talk about that later. And a third are kind of interesting. This book is how I framed it. Is that here is, and this is where we can get into some of the topics that underlie your show. Is that I ended up starting to work on a book. The thing was like Lord of the Rings size, because as you talked about already, mental fitness fits into this huge. So my dad was like, you should write a book about this. And I was like, about what? Like, who the hell would, this is my story, And when you hear my story, you're going to be like, oh my God. And he was like, no, like there might be people out there when they read that, they'll be like, I'm not alone,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes back to suicide. It's like, when you are at that space, you're like, I'm all by myself,
Yeah.
And so he's like, that has to change. Well, as I get working on a Lord of the Rings sized anthology, one of my top best friends kicks the bucket. And while it's not deemed suicide, you tell me. At the time, he was having insomnia, so he wasn't sleeping. He was, for people who don't know what sleep apnea is, it's one of the rare areas that doctors actually do usually know about, or they know what to do. And usually this is like, and you don't have to be totally fat. I was surprised to have this, but if you have some extra weight around the neck, and folks, this is something that really can kill you. If your partner, wife, whatever, roommate is like, Aaron, bro, I can hear you snoring through the wall at night, you might want to jump on grabbing the doctor and being like, hey, I'm a little worried about this thing called sleep apnea. Can I get a test for that? And we can get you tested for that, and they can get you care for that. The care is a little intense. You have to wear a mask that forces air down your throat. So I understand why some people struggle with it. He was not a very good person at wearing that mask.
Mm-hmm.
So he's also having issues with not taking care of that airflow. And he ended up dying of some cardiac related issues. So it hit me right away in that moment. Like, can we swear on this show?
Oh, yeah.
I was like, shit. I didn't finish in time. I never got the thing, because I had thought about him when I started. I was like, ooh, is there something that I could write that would help him?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it's too late. I didn't get there. So, I sort of started asking these bigger questions like, well, what if God was like, hey, Nick, you're coming with me in 2 weeks, so you might want to wrap up everything. I was like, so then I asked the second question, well, if that's the case, what if someone said like, Nick, you like leave your top 10 sleep facts to your friends, family, peers, folks you've met like Aaron, that represent the last, which started as 4 years, became basically now 6 years of research, and put that as the sort of framework of the book. So number one, the book isn't going to be like, in Nick's chapter, we're going to tell you about all the phases of sleep, which for some reason they all do this. And they're like, and here are all the things that are going on scientifically and whatnot. And it will bore you with language that doesn't make any sense. This book will not do this. This book really is those 10 things. And for folks who have like ADHD issues, or you're just like the average American who increasingly has a hard time reading a book, I did something, and I don't know why my book has to be the first one to do it, Aaron, but every chapter start and every subheading has the reading length at the top. So if you're sitting there in the living room and you're like, should I read right now? You can look where you left off and be like, oh, the next section is 2.5 minutes. I don't have to leave for 10 minutes. I can read it. Like, I'm good to go. So anyway, so that chapter is about, we have this idea that like hard work will always produce results, right? And like you said, it was like, if I work so hard and I don't sleep, I'll be amazing. And it's like, no, for most of you. In fact, when you were saying that, I was thinking about that similarity with these broken sort of areas where you're like, okay, in fitness as a whole and to the general public, sleep wasn't being valued like you said it was. But if you look at who's the elite people and you watch interviews of them, you'll notice a pattern. They're all like, hardly sleep the night before. So right away, oh, so some of these elite players are having a tough time sleeping the night before, and they've come to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing that I think the book does that other books don't. It says, guys, it's actually normal to have sleep, to not sleep perfectly. And a lot of us get upset and scared when we don't. So it's okay if you're not sleeping 100% perfect. But the second thing is most of them will also be like, they'll tell you kind of what their day was before. And this is across sports. And they're like, yeah, I got home, blah, blah, blah. I had my usual afternoon meal and my usual what? My afternoon nap for X amount of time before my wife got me up, and then I did this, and then I do this, and then I show up to the arena. That's been going on for a long time, which should tell us should answer one question right away. People are always like, naps are bad, right? Like, we shouldn't nap for sleep. And it's like, well, I don't know. These guys have been doing it for decades. But
naps a freaking superpower.
Right? At a specific time with a specific length. So it's been there. Now it's like, now can it be there for other people? So the second thing that more recently has come up that you brought up, that people I sent the picture of what I'm calling it sleep stupidity. So it's gonna be a short series that I do. But one of the things that it underpins is an idea that you snagged, which is that this is an old understanding of what sleep is, and there is a new understanding. The old one is like what you suggested, like there's not much going on, so if there's not much going on, isn't that a waste of time? And it's like, there is so much going on when it comes to sleep that if your idea was, oh yeah, like I live my life and I'm engaged in it and I'm interactive, and then when I get to sleep, I turn off. I won't say that you're an idiot, but when we move in the new world, when you start saying things like that, people will be like, what a stupid idiot. The amount of stuff and activity and engagement is insane. It changes during certain parts of sleep, but to say that sleep is a restful event would be an old understanding. So I don't mean to frame this so like guys can be like, cool, I'm gonna like do sleep because sleep's active. It's just like, no, that's the reality. It's a very active, fully engaged thing. It's a little weird because you're not hyper controlling it, but you'd be wrong in your understanding to think like, oh, well, I'm not really doing much when during that part, and I really want to be fully engaged. Oh no, you're fully engaged, guys, when you're sleeping, for
Yeah,
sure.
I think that's an important part because like when I talk about mental health, I've said for a while now that it needs to be rebranded and it needs to be sexier. Because if it's sexier, more people are going to think about wanting to take care of it. Because the old, adage of mental health was like, oh, that guy's depressed. He's in a dark corner. Like, let's just move him over there. We don't need that person. But that's really not what it's about. Mental health is how you think, feel, and act. And so if we can shape it in a way like if you start to take care of it proactively with the tools, then wow, you're going to be the best version of yourself. And sleep is part of that mental health toolkit, obviously. And so just like you're calling it sleep fitness, that's sexy rebrand because people feel like that, like, oh, like I'm doing this thing and it could help me. And so I think like in our age, I guess branding is extremely important, as you talked about at the top, right? Because it's going to be like if your ideas are attractive, they got to be put into the right in front of the right people so that they can benefit the most number of people. But you don't want to sacrifice the substance of the product. You want to stay true to what it is. So there's always going to be a fine balance between that. I think about that when I'm putting my podcast on YouTube, like how fucking outrageous can I make this title? And it has nothing to do with the content of the episode. I'm like, I don't want to do that because that's not, that's not honest. That's not that doesn't have integrity. I'm going to put what it's about. And if people watch it, they watch it. Great. If not, it is what it is. I'm not going to put like World War III, I guess that actually might be possible. But anyways, not to leave the important subject for one, but you get my point. Look, you get my point. And so I think it's an important part to think about these things more as a proactive way to live our lives rather than being reactive. There's always going to be reactive situations, especially when it comes to sleep, because like you don't know, like your situation, you had no idea you were going to go 17 days without sleep. And then, you
No.
went on this whole journey and then you became proactive about it now, trying to help people. But we're always going to be thrusted in these sort of in situations that are uncontrollable and sort of how we respond to them and move forward to make the best decisions.
Yeah, and I think, and just so people know, like, I didn't go out and go, I'm going to copyright the term sleep fitness. So it's not like I own it. It was to serve the exact function that you just said. It was like, we need something that unifies these things together that people can relate to. If it ends up being something totally different, I don't give a shit. It's just that it needs to be there, like you said. And maybe there needs to be a couple different versions of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, one of the things that I think, you're like, how's life lately? Like, one of the things that really hit me the other day that, like, just I couldn't have been happier is that the early reviews of the book, and then I get this like video and these 3 images and this official Amazon emblem, which is that your book has gone #1 on the top 100 of category X. Well, I go #1 in a sleep related category, which is cool, and I'll talk about why that's kind of weird. But the one that I'm like, man, like, I've worked for 9 or 10 months straight on this, is that it went #2. And it's funny, people are like, you always are happy if you're #1. It's like, no. I was happier to take silver, which is that it went #2 in top 100 books for ebooks in the area of healthy living.
Mm.
And I was like, yes, I want people who are like on Amazon who are like, God, I got to get healthier, and see my book and go, you know what? That might actually really be something to help me get healthier. Cool. Let me snag that. And so, to answer your question, I'm like, ooh, there's little rimblings of things lately that I'm like, that is good. Like, I might be totally in debt because I made the book, but I'm like, this is the beginning of why, So for all those people who got it, I'm just so happy for them that they saw it as something to support their overall health, and I think that's the most important thing. Should we jump into that story? Did you segue me for that?
Yeah, please. I mean, we're 30 minutes in. Might as well get some personal anecdotes going.
Yeah, so, first of all, I'm so thrilled to be on your show and to have been able to already just kind of pull the curtain back for a bunch of your listeners on stuff that I find a lot of people think like that they've learned about sleep or they've learned about fitness and their relationship to sleep. And it's like, that's a problem. You've capped yourself. There's way more. I think one of the things that blew my brain when I was I'll fast forward in my personal story before I share it with you to say that when I got to the point where I was like, okay, I better start working on this. What was amazing, Aaron, was that for folks that haven't used this, and I guess I can't really recommend this for the average person, but Google has a google.com/scholar portal. You might like this for fitness stuff or mental fitness stuff. And boom, just like search a couple things in there, you're going to get published science research documents. You're not going to get them all. So for most people, they're really hard to read through. But I'll just put it this way. I was blown away with the amount of answers and research and things that had been found around sleep that are just totally not known by the public at all. You would have thought, based on the fact that, and again, this is where things get like big movement picture. The CDC in 2014, I don't know who or where in the government that they said, hey, Center for Disease Control, we're getting some feedback that like sleep might be an issue for people in our country. Can you like check this out? So it's like, and first of all, just like folks, like think about it. They didn't go to like some public health agency. They went to a Center for Disease. That's how like concerned they were. And then 2014, Center of Disease Control came out and they're like, okay, well, we've evaluated. Here's the conclusion. It's an epidemic. Okay. And what was the response? Crickets. Nothing. Silence. Radio silence. That I'm not aware of this happening in any other thing. And then in 2020, the CDC was like, nothing's happening. Hello, public. We have another announcement to make. The current conditions of sleep in Americans is a epidemic.
It's horrible.
And for folks that don't know what an epidemic really is, it's just like, it's some kind of ailment or disease or illness that is spreading really fast and moving and growing at like abnormal rates across all certain categories, So so many of the answers are out there, Aaron. It's just like, how do we put them together and how do we serve people? So the personal story thing is like, how the hell, why am I even on Aaron's show? How did I even get here? Is that, and I always start this now with mistakes happen. So like, I'm not telling this to blame people or institutions. It's just like, this is just what happened. Mm-hmm. So in 2018, I've had a sleep issue for a long time. Sometimes I forget the name of it. Do you know the name of the physical thing where you have tingling in different body parts?
Mm-hmm. That's just when I poop too long and my feet fall asleep.
No, there's a name for it. I got to look it up. I always forget it. But the short story, because someone asked me, and I was like, oh, actually, they're right. This started way, way, way long ago in a very innocent way. And that's why I'm like, guys, if you're listening and you do have a sleep issue or are concerned that it might be connected to something, like, it's really probably not your fault at all.
Yeah.
So, like, mine was like, I had tingling, a neuropathy.
There it is.
That's what it is, neuropathy. So I had what they call neuropathy in my foot, which really came from like a spinal injury. And so I had fuzzy tingling in it. Well, during the day, you're so active, you don't give a shit. But suddenly when you're lying down and you're relaxing every aspect of your body and there's tingling going on somewhere, you notice it. Yeah. So I was like, man, I'm having a hard time going to sleep. So I went to the doctor and I was like, Bob, there's this tingling in my foot and like, I'm having a hard time going to sleep. And he's like, whatever. And I said, give me your foot. So I just started doing this to his foot. And he was like, And I said, now, Bob, just imagine that never stops. And he was like, script, sleeping pill. Here you go, Nick. Sorry about that. Here you go. Have a good time. So it started in a very innocent way, longer than I even remembered till recently. Fast forward to 2018, I had a healthcare provider who was on a health insurance I was taking temporarily after I left my Fortune 500 training job. And she kind of was like shaming me that I needed that medication.
Hmm.
And so I was like, maybe, you know what? I got to the point where I felt such shame and embarrassment. I was like, maybe I'll just like deal with it for a couple weeks and not ask her.
Yeah.
Well, after a little while, my sleep started to erode in a way that I even was like, something's wrong. Like it seems like it's eroding from the morning and it's eroding from the nighttime. And so I called the place and said, I think I need to get seen soon. And they were like, okay, we'll sit you in next. Well, putting me in quote next was 17 days later. I know that because I was like desperately looking at my paper calendar and was like 1, 2, 3, 4. And I was like, no. Like I think there's something bigger going on. And they were like, that's great. We'll see you in 7. Well, they didn't say 17. They were like, we'll see you on August 18th. And I was like, and we hung up. And so I didn't know this was going to happen. But what happened was that I never went to sleep again. And just so for fun, for people to realize and know this, yes, that's the Guinness World Record. No, I don't get to gloat about it because some decades ago, again, like I said, guys, the science has already been there. Guinness was like, oh my God, what we know about it is so destructive. We're going to stop tracking it so that Aaron and his pals don't try to like get on the record books. That's how bad it is. Guinness is like, they too were like, we're not going to try to benefit from this. This is a public health risk, so we're going to not do it. There was 2 previous record holders you can look up. I can't remember their stories perfectly. It was like a guy doing a fundraiser in Times Square in a tube. This was back in the 60s, and I want to say he went like maybe 8 or 9 days, and I mean, really quickly, Aaron, he was like, oh, first of all, like every New York medical doctor was like, vroom, and was like, we never get to study this, and they were like outside the tube, like, what's going on with this guy? Well, I'll just tell you in short, he became paranoid right away.
Mm-hmm.
Like to the point when they were like, here's your food. He was like, what'd you put in this food? He became combative. This is like a very gregarious radio show host that people just love. He was like combative. And when whenever that day was over, he was gone, and then people didn't see him for a long time. The other one was some teenager who, as a high school science project, like beat him by 2 days. He too disappeared. No one saw him for a long time. So those were the previous record holders. So yeah, I mean, you don't sleep for 17 nights. People will ask like, "Hey, what's that like?" And I say, like, have you seen that Marvel movie where I think it's a Doctor Strange one where he's sending Loki through this weird portal where there's no floor and he's just falling perpetually? That's what it's like. I don't know if I even had the mental place, Aaron, to think about about killing myself. Like, you become, I don't know what day it is, but you become so dislocated from yourself, and you'll totally get this. And I think even people with like mental health issues can appreciate this. Sometimes you get to a low that's ahead of I give up and I'm going to take my life, where you're pissed and you're angry about something. And that anger gives you energy.
Mm-hmm.
And my friends, I didn't have that. It was the first time in my life where when I was like, I reached mentally for that anger and for motivation, for the energy to do something. It wasn't there. It was gone. I was like, I don't even have that. So later I looked it up. It's what people will call psychosis, where you have a complete dislocation from reality. So there's another video with that CEO where I'm like, Netflix kind of saved me. Like, I got on the living room couch, gripped the side of it, and put Netflix on, and I just wrote it out for days and days and days and days. And again, I don't think during that 17 days I thought, like, maybe if I just kill myself, this will end. I get there later in certain areas because what happens is that for the next 2.5 years, I eventually get plugged into the system. And there's a couple times where, again, part of my own personal story is that, like, an easy way to think about it is that, like, I fell through every gap in the structures that have been set up to that are responsible for caring for people in the public. And so there did get a time where it was like, after 6 times that I was like, I'm going to go see this person, I'm going to go get this help. And they're like, sorry, we don't have one here today that speaks English. I'd be lying to you if I didn't say, when I got down to the public transportation train and looked at it and was like, I don't know, maybe I'll just jump in front of that shit and end this. Because it got to a point where it was just like, I just want to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So what is, like, in a way, to me, eventually death became a very attractive thing, because it was like, well, cool, if I die, I'm sleeping in a way.
Yeah.
You know,
You
and
get a
that
rest. You get a rest finally.
yeah, and so that did evolve to a place in a way that was peaceful, which was like, if I could figure out some non-violent way of, like, killing myself, I would finally get the outcome I want, which is just to sleep. And, you know, and so I did get there. There's no doubt about that. Um, so I want to jump to the, like, why didn't I die? For folks who are like, you know, boy, I relate to aspects of that sort of level of, like, you're living death, you know. And so a couple of them are theological, and I'll quickly hit them. You know, I grew up in a Christian church, you know, and I think these are some of, you know, I haven't decided if it's a podcast or an article series, but I'm playing with this idea about the gifts of darkness.
Ooh.
And I'd say one of the gifts is that if you're a Christian and you've struggled with the idea, especially in a sort of logical, rational world, boy, you know, I'd have to say that I learned why faith matters. There was definitely, for the first time ever, to me, I think I realized a faith that there was going to be another side if I endured.
Mm.
And that's why, like, in some interviews, when people give me these, like, radical examples of people in bad sleep situations, I'm always like, as bad as it gets, you know, and I would say this probably even in some mental health things, you can come back.
Mm.
You know, you might not know that it's tomorrow. You might want it to be tomorrow, but maybe it's next week. Maybe it's in 4 months. But to have the faith, the power of faith is that it will give you whatever little mental edge you need to make it long enough to see that day come true. And I think the second thing was, actually, I'll skip that part. It's a little too godly. But for folks, like, I did have to do 2 hospital visits here in Massachusetts when things were, you know, just crazy. And nurses would come up to me and quietly be like, "Can I ask you a question? How did you not die?" And I didn't have an answer then. And for a while, I made a practice, Aaron, of no matter what I was studying, I would always read a book on sleep every month. And actually, it was after the book was done that I came upon this, and this is really cool. It basically said, if you look at, so one of the first phases of sleep that is so important for folks is called slow wave sleep, or deep sleep. And it's like the first half, mostly happens in the first half of the night. And so this one research project study found out that if you took a guy who had 20 years experience in reading those like active electronic studies of people's every sleep metric and heart pulse and everything, and you stuck Aaron in one room and gave him, and it was like, Aaron, go to sleep. And then you put me in another room and you're like, Nick, we want you to start what you started training in when I was like 17. which is mindfulness meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went back to the lab analyst and said, so, who's doing what? And they were like, they're both sleeping? And it was like, you are incorrect. Next tech, what are they doing? And by the end of the study, they found out we can't tell the difference between the inner body function and process of mindfulness meditation and sleep. And then I was like, oh my God, this is the scientific explanation as to why I didn't die during that time. I would get on the bed and be like, maybe if I just rest my whole body. And then I started using mindfulness meditation I had learned as a teenager. And then I started doing hours, And I saw like health professionals during this time. And I remember I would see this one and I'd be like, hey, guess what? I'm up to like 6 hours a day. So if you think about it, I was getting like 6 hours of slow wave physical recharge energy during that period. And I think that gave me just enough to physically survive and
Yeah.
get through. Yeah. So I don't want to say any more about my crazy individual story.
Yeah, just like a point on thinking about suicide and all of that. Yeah, 2018 was a very pivotal year for the both of us. In your story and in my story, that's the year that I lost my sister Rachel to suicide. And when thinking about people in that position, I like for the majority of people, I think no one really wants to die. Just like
Right.
you felt, they want their pain or whatever they're going through to be over, and they find that there is absolutely no way out. Because like you stated earlier, when we're feeling this way, we think we're the only person on the planet who feels this exact way in this exact moment. And we've exhausted all options, and my only option is to like, fuck it. Like, this is my only way to get some sleep or to stop feeling this immense amount of pain or to be in this fucking hell that I'm in. And so yeah, the whole point is to try and reach people a little bit before they get to that point and say, hey man, there's options, there's things we can do, there's stuff that can happen, all the sort of things that can be helpful in suicide prevention. So I think that's an important point. And then when you think about also like the number one way to torture someone, it's like make them lonely and sleep deprive them. Like they're gonna fucking lose their mind like very soon. And so like that's why loneliness, community, like social connection, relationships are extremely important piece to not only just to every aspect of our life. Like think about when me and Nick go hang out and have some dinner and our fucking conversation was awesome and we had a great time. I leave that dinner like, oh, that was awesome. Like I feel energized, I feel better.
Aaron, there's already several studies that have shown, someone just dropped this on LinkedIn the other day. Your point is 100% proven by science. People who were feeling disconnected more socially and less social connections did not sleep as well as those who had a night like you just said.
Yeah. Because then when I get home from that dinner with you, I'm not overthinking about what I said or did it go okay, or then I'm not looping that in my brain over and over again. Then I'm not telling myself like, oh shit, I got to wake up in the morning. I have this big thing. And now I'm forcing myself to sleep. And then when I try and force myself to good sleep, I'm not sleeping. And then I'm waking up and then it's a whole thing, but instead I lay in my bed. I'm like, yeah, it was a great night. All right. Sounds good. It's not that easy, but my point being is there's some processes that
those feelings then slide you into a space where you then transition into sleep.
Yeah. And so, yeah.
I'm so sorry about your sister.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. Like when I was thinking about getting on here today, I was just like, yeah, I just wanted you to know I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Her 6-year anniversary is in September. So coming up.
Yeah. And thanks for not, for folding the towel, but turning around and doing what my friend Lisa does. She's like, how do we fix the problem and make the solution twice as huge?
Yeah.
And and that's what you did, And so, for anyone that listens to your program and sees it and whatnot, like, thank you so much, Like it's a service in a way that we can't really put money on yet,
Yeah. Well, thank you. Same to you, my friend, for digging yourself out of the trenches and, you know, making the
Yeah.
world a little bit better place.
Yeah. So to pick up kind of just right there is that, and again, for folks who are like, man, I've been like trying to get my sleep fixed for a long time. I went 2.5 more years with what American science calls insomnia. And I saw multiple people, nice people, good people. And finally, after 2.5 years, I was just like sitting in my living room and I was like, it's been 2.5 years. Nobody has taught me anything about how to sleep. And then that led to like, well, then I'm going to have to do it myself.
That's right.
And so to pitch myself, let's get businessy. So for people that see me, one of the weird reasons why I have this bizarrely, almost statistically, irrationally high success rate is that I think because my story was so crazy, and this was something when you asked me like, hey, is there anything new you want to talk about? This will filter right there. Is that I ended up working and building a method to repair myself and to get well that came from such a background. And so, and it's funny, I'm working on some articles like recently where it's like, if you want to win and you want to hit your target, when would you ever rely on one thing? Well, I'm sure I'll meet some sleep coach at some point. But so far, I'm the only one I know who does this, which is that for everything that we target, I always ensure that there's 3 things that we're doing. I like to stack them. I like to make them so that they're as efficient as possible. So it's like you don't maybe have to do completely 3 different things. Maybe we figured out, if you do this one thing, it hits 2 things. But for each area that we say, okay, hey, that's the next target, my method is to stack the odds in your favor. Like at that point in my life and in the lives of my clients, I'm like, I want to win. So let's suck out hope as being necessary. Let's set up something of a method that we evolve around your personal issues. We'll adjust it over time, but let's stack it so that we have the confidence that, like that old saying of like, you just keep whacking away at the bottom of the tree. It's going to go, and so I'll tell certain clients like, listen, I don't know when the tree is going to fall on this big issue for you. It is going to fall if we keep this up and you keep this up for long enough. And so that's a certain level of confidence and certainly a unique thing that I bring. But when I started to look around and I'm like kind of I have this newsletter that I'm writing and I'm doing this like sort of LeBron James, like sort of related version, is like, boy, like in other areas of life, people don't rely on this like, I'll just try this one thing. But that's a real common thing with sleep. I mean, like friends of mine, Aaron, who after I started, I was like, I need you to beta test this online class version of a book I'm going to release someday that I'm doing. And even they would be like, oh yeah, I got to finish like chapter 8 before Jessica kills me. And I'm like, why would Jessica kill you? I like overheat like crazy at night and like she can't sleep and stuff. I'm like, so he didn't even think to tap me on the shoulder. Or one of my best friends who was like, oh yeah, in college, like I wasn't sleeping well, so I got some new pillows and I got a new mattress. But eventually it wasn't great. I'm like, that was 25 years ago. So, the core service I offer usually is like this 6-week program. And then the thing that is, again, sort of different about me is like, we have that program. What I'm finding is that about 4 or 5 weeks, the repair aspect, if it's necessary, usually hits. And then this is the cool new thing that I think folks, this might seem weird, but I believe based on today's culture of the information age and the speed and the competitiveness and, people are like, oh my God, what about AI? I'm like, this might start to become necessary, which is I started to beta test after a while when I was coming back to doing coaching with certain people. I was like, hey, I'll work with you for a little bit. And then if after 4 or 5 weeks, a couple insights and a couple tactics are of benefit, let me know and write me a testimonial. Well, Aaron, the feedback I started getting was nothing that I thought. I thought I would be like a car repairman. Aaron would be like, I think this is broken, Nick. I'd like to see you and get it repaired and then be back and going. Well, the thing that started to happen, and I started to realize like 4 months ago, and it's changing some of the way that we sort of are framing my work, is they were coming back like this. Oh, hey, Nick. Wow. Like, I ended up like having enough energy to be engaged for the day, which was like, I needed it for work. But the weird thing was I'd go home and I was still engaged and available to my kids and my wife and dinner and like the rest of the night. This is awesome. Thank you so much. It changed my life. And I was like,
Sick.
it did? Well, that's cool. That's great. And then someone else, and then someone else. And so kind of like, if you can imagine it, most of us think like this. It's like, here's the requirement for the day. And I'm going to build a video and animate it like this. Right? Here's like the like level requirement that you need of sleep to create the energy physically and mentally for the day. And so you sleep at night to hopefully get enough of it, right? So the next day you use it, and then that night you need to sleep so you can refill it. Well, when you said anything new coming up, I'm like, this is it. If you repair it, but you keep working with me, kind of like an athlete, or like someone who saves their money and then invests it wisely. Well, let's think of sleep as giving you sleep currency or sleep energy currency. Well, now you do it long enough and that currency goes above the 0 line. So what they were finding was I used the 500 credits I needed for work, and then I went home and there was still 500 left and I only needed 200. And now what I'm finding is that, well, what happens if you sleep again? Well, now you are living above the 0 line.
Yeah.
Right? And if you think about people who, right, or the sort of the theory and hope for folks who retire well is that they never spend any of the money they saved. They cover their expenses with the profits, and then it hopefully goes up again, and then they live off the profits. So to blow people's brains, guys, sleep doesn't have to be, and maybe like 50 years from now, this will just be normal. Sleep doesn't have to be this thing that like you repair and get better and function well. It actually can give you something of a competitive advantage, which might be necessary in today's world. And I basically realized, you know what this does? It makes you burnout proof. You know, so for some, I'm having like this little trickle of clients, and I'm starting to ask that question, and they're like, they are CEOs, they are high performers, you know, or they want to be the best in their area. And I'm like, cool. And I'll get that question, like, do you sleep enough to cover for the day? Or are you living off the top end of the sleep energy that you're building? And they're like, first one. I'm like, cool. Why don't we do a couple sessions and I'll get you on a road to where you are living off the profits of great sleep and you can like perform at a high level. You know, so that's like one of the cool things that's new.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the competitive
It's the
advantage
way
part.
opposite of death.
Yeah.
It's today's podcast, Nick's offering of super life.
Yeah, that's amazing. To sort of wrap up our conversation here, is there any actionable tips that people can have right away to maybe implement later, and then obviously work with you or buy the book to be the sort of the secondary options there? But anything you want to specifically, tactical tips you want to leave with people?
Yeah, definitely. Let me write the number 3 down. I always like to put things in threes. So I think the first one right out of the gate when it comes to suicide, and this was something I had said, oh, hey, I want to get you, and this is in the book. You know, I kind of basically promised people with the book is I won't give you a book where it's like, here's this research, let me explain it a little bit and write it in a cool way. Basically, it was like, I will rip out all the research. Just trust me, I read it, and I'll give you the like what it's really, how it's useful,
The
right?
juice.
Yeah, yeah. So I made one exception, which is this idea of mindfulness meditation. So I never thought I'd end up that this, when I started this journey, I never thought this would be part of my answer. But when it comes to suicide and sleep, one of the studies in the middle of the book, one of the chapters is called Observing Silence, right? And it's about meditation. The studies, and there's this one that where they were like, actually, I love this about Americans. Instead of being like, well, most of the studies are like a half an hour meditation. Aaron, let's do a study with, most places are like 45 minutes. America's like, let's see what happens if we cut it down to 15 minutes. I'm like, 15 minutes? So basically the study showed, well, we got these people together 3 times a week. I think they were college age students. And we had them do this mindfulness meditation for 15 minutes. And we suggested they do 1 or 2 sessions during the off week. Well, what they found statistically significant results months later was that suicidal ideation and attempts dropped through the floor. So the number one thing tactically that I would say to you, if suicide has ever been a problem and sleep has, get busy learning, find somebody, I don't care if it's me or whoever, call Aaron, he'll teach you, to start integrating mindfulness meditation. And if you're like, I don't have time, that argument's stupid. You got 15 minutes in a day?
Yeah.
And then if I wanted to be really tactical, Aaron, I'd say sneak it into the mid-afternoon somewhere.
Okay.
That's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. The second thing I think that's the most shocking to people, one of the chapters in the book is called Fix Night with Day. And I think this is something for people to really, again, like, I'm going to work on that, like, sleep stupidity. This is the old idea. I'm going to get better sleep with the things I do at night. The vast majority of what comes out in terms of the quality and depth of your sleep at night is dependent on the quality and activity of what you do during the day.
Mm-hmm.
So we go into different things about that, but I would just say one thing that would have, if you're like, man, I have, insomnia like Nick did, or at least that I can relate to it. One of the things I think would have cut off 1.5 years, maybe 2 of it, would if someone had just said, Nick, get out of bed before 10 and get that skinny ass of yours out on the street and walk for 20 to 30 minutes and let the sun just kind of come into the side of your eye. Sounds like totally simple. You'd have to have the will to do it. But strangely enough, it will create the serotonin necessary that later in the night is the precursor to the melatonin that will then help transition you into sleep. And I would say that again, like, how many things can I really say would have probably cut 1 year to 1.5 years off? It's just that. It's just get up in the morning and get some sun, So those are like the 2 major ones. And then I think if I really had to think seriously about where suicide and sleep meet, this is and I've laughed even when I've assigned this. There is some, and there is plenty of research that has shown that this is true. I don't know that they can explain why, but again, guys, these things don't need to be huge. I'm talking like 7 minutes at night of just some free writing in a journal.
Yeah.
That's it. The correlations that show you sleep better because of it there's just tons of research that I often find myself adding that to someone's nighttime routine, and it's super effective. It's also super effective for depression and suicide because you're expressing yourself. You're getting some of these things out, which is allowing you to have a secondary reflection about it, which is sometimes all you need to stop yourself from taking that last step to killing yourself. So those are my big 3.
Those are awesome. Yeah, I love how there's just so much overlap between the mind, mental health, sleep, your physical body, and how they're all just interconnected and the things we can do throughout the day to help better ourselves for a better night of sleep or to help bring ourselves into a better state of mind or wellness, they're all just joined at the hip. And it's basically trying to get really clear on the basics of being a human, of eating, sleeping, moving, and thinking, basically. And
I mean,
sleeping now,
in another way, it's
finally.
like,
Go ahead.
no, I mean, like, I was just gonna, like, just sort of praise your glory and say that, like, guys, like, if you take it seriously for a second, like, the world's has been going on for billions of years. It's gonna keep going on for billions of years. You have a sand bit of time in this body, and so, like, it's a gift.
Mhm.
And so enjoy it. Like, you should be maximizing how much you enjoy it, and that it's an experience that is worthy of that tiny bit of time. So for any way that you can to squeeze the most out of it, go for it. And that's why I love the work you're doing.
Yeah. Back at you, man. Well, I appreciate this conversation very much. And where should people go if they want more of you?
Yeah. So right now, I think the easiest place to start is this little place people might have heard called Amazon.com.
Yep.
And just type in sleep fitness. It will come out, and come up. And I think one of the things that I'm doing right now until the end of August is that for folks who pick up like a paper copy of it, if they just send me a message, and I'll give you my email now, with a selfie with the book, I'm offering what normally is like $175 sleep session, which is supposed to be 60 minutes, but I always let them run 90 minutes. And so that's there as just a promotion for now, to get you going right away, which can be great for folks. So that's there. The email is nick@sleepfitnesscoach.com. So I want to encourage people, like, I always do like a 15-20 minute free sort of I've not been trained in sales, so these aren't like meetings where I'm like, I'm gonna figure out how to sell you on this. No, it's more like, like, A, can I get you to a doctor for these two issues? And B, what are your options? Is something like 2 or 3 sessions really all you need? You're just like kind of need to clean things up, or is there something bigger going on, and we can discuss those options? And there's never like and if you don't sign up by the end of the 20 minutes, then you'll lose the 20% discount. Like, no, like, go live your life, figure out what works for you and makes sense, and it will be there for you. So yeah, and I think my biggest presence right now, and informationally, if people just want to start kind of getting their feet wet with it, is on LinkedIn. Just put my name in, Nicholas Stewart. It will pop up, and again, I just really want to encourage people, if you just like, you're curious or you have a question about something, send me the message. Like, I will shoot you an answer. Like, it doesn't have to be some, it will go through the virtual assistant who filters it through this AI, and then it'll be an answer. Like, I'll give you an answer in 48 hours for sure.
Yeah. Well, book,
Yeah.
email, and LinkedIn are linked below in the show notes. And Nick, thank you so much, my friend.
Oh, Aaron,
Yes.
when will this air? When will this air? Okay.
Mm,
When it will air, I just found out that I can actually do this thing on Amazon, which will allow me to do a quote promotion. And so I'm like, ooh, I want to try this. So when
mhm.
let me know. And what I'll do is, on that day, for your listeners who are watching the podcast, I'll make it so on that day the ebook is $0, so they can just go in and get it for free.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. That sounds friggin' awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.